The rain hammered against the cracked pavement of Noctare's lower district as Mara pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders. Another 16-hour shift at the laundromat behind her. Another night of walking home alone through streets where hope went to die. The neon signs of pawn shops and gambling dens cast sickly colors across puddles that never seemed to dry, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed their familiar song. She should have taken the longer route. She knew that now. But exhaustion makes people careless, and the alley behind the abandoned Grand Victoria Hotel cut 15 minutes off her walk. 15 minutes closer to her cramped studio apartment. 15 minutes closer to collapsing into bed before the sun rose and the cycle began again. But as she turned the corner, she heard it. A child's scream, cut short by a man's harsh laughter. And in that moment, Mara's exhaustion became rage. Which country are you watching from? And if you're enjoying this dark tale of unexpected heroism, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more stories from the shadows of Noctare. Mara's heart hammered as she pressed herself against the grimy brick wall, peering around the corner into the wider section of the alley. 5 men. No, 6. Surrounded a small figure huddled against the hotel's rusted service entrance. The girl couldn't have been more than 12. Her expensive school uniform torn and muddied, blonde hair matted with blood from a cut above her eye. "Please," the child whispered, voice breaking. "My father will—" "Your father ain't here, princess," the tallest one sneered, spinning a knife between his fingers. The red bandana around his neck marked him as Crimson Fang territory, the gang that had been warring with the Valamont Empire for control of Noctare's eastern districts. "And when he finds what's left of you, he'll know the Fangs don't play games no more." Mara's hands shook as she looked around desperately. A length of rusted pipe lay among the trash piled against the wall, probably left behind when the hotel's plumbing was stripped for scrap years ago. She grabbed it, the metal cold and heavy in her grip. Every rational thought screamed at her to run, to call the police, to do anything except what she was about to do. But Mara had spent 23 years watching people turn away from suffering, watching the powerful crush the weak, watching the city devour anyone who didn't fight back. Not tonight. Not this girl. "Hey!" Mara's voice cracked like thunder as she stepped into the alley, pipe raised. "Get away from her!" The men spun around, surprise flickering across their faces before dissolving into cruel amusement. The tall one laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Well, well, looks like the princess has a guardian angel. You must be stupider than you look, girl." "Maybe," Mara said, moving forward on unsteady legs. "But there's 6 of you and 1 little girl. Doesn't seem like a fair fight to me." "Fair?" The knife wielder took a step toward her. "Nothing's fair in Noctare, sweetheart. You should have learned that by now." The first one rushed her, and Mara swung the pipe with everything she had. The impact vibrated up her arms as metal connected with his shoulder, sending him sprawling into the puddles with a howl of pain. But then the others were on her, fists and boots, pain exploding across her ribs and face. She tasted copper, felt her lips split, but kept swinging the pipe blindly, desperately. "Run!" She screamed at the girl between blows. "Run!" Through the chaos, through the pain, Mara saw the blonde child stumble to her feet and sprint toward the alley's mouth. The tall one tried to pursue, but Mara threw herself at his legs, bringing him down hard. He kicked her in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs. But she'd bought enough time. The girl was gone, disappeared into the maze of streets beyond. "You're dead," the man spat, hauling her up by her hair. The knife glinted in the weak streetlight filtering into the alley. "You just cost us a fortune, and now you're gonna—" Sirens. Close. Getting closer. Someone must have heard the commotion, must have finally called the police. The men exchanged glances. Then the tall one shoved Mara hard against the wall and ran, his companions following like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Mara slid down the brick wall, every breath a knife in her side. Blood dripped from her nose, her mouth, from a gash on her forehead. But she was alive. And so was that girl. Against all odds, against all reason, they were both alive. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, the sound of sirens growing distant as consciousness slipped away. What happens when Mara wakes up? Will the girl be safe? And who is she really? Subscribe and hit that like button to find out. Chapter 2 is coming up next. Mara woke to fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of a hospital. Her whole body ached, each breath sending spikes of pain through her ribs. Cracked, the doctor said, but not broken. Her left eye was swollen shut, stitches pulled tight across her forehead, and her hands were wrapped in bandages where the pipe had torn open her palms. But she was alive. "You're awake." A police officer stood at the foot of her bed, his expression unreadable. Detective Morris, according to his badge, a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 20 years on the force. "Is she okay?" Mara's voice came out as a rasp. "The girl, is she? She's fine. Scared, banged up a bit, but fine." Morris pulled a chair closer and sat down, studying her face. "You know who you saved tonight." Mara shook her head, immediately regretting it as pain lanced through her skull. "Isabella Vale." Morris let the name hang in the air like smoke. "Daughter of Lucian Vale. Ring any bells?" The name hit Mara like ice water. Everyone in Noctare knew that name, even people like her who kept their heads down and avoided the underworld's machinations. Lucian Vale, the Dark Prince of the Eastern Territories. The man who'd built an empire from gambling dens, protection rackets, and rumors of darker enterprises. A man whispered about in fear, whose enemies disappeared without a trace. "Oh God," Mara breathed. The Crimson Fangs. They were going to kill her, to send a message. Exactly. Morris leaned forward, his voice dropping. "This is going to start a war, Miss Thorne. The Fangs just declared open season, and Vale... Well, let's just say he doesn't take kindly to people threatening his daughter. You might have just lit the fuse on something that'll burn down half the city." Mara closed her eyes, exhaustion and pain washing over her. "I couldn't just let them hurt her. She was just a kid." "I know." Something almost like respect crossed the detective's features. "That's what makes you different from most people in this city. You actually gave a damn." He stood, placing a card on the bedside table. "You'll need to give a statement when you're feeling better. And Miss Thorne, watch your back. The Fangs might come looking for the woman who cost them their leverage." After he left, Mara stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She'd worked so hard to stay invisible, to survive by not making waves. Now she'd saved the daughter of a crime lord and made enemies of one of the city's most vicious gangs. All for doing the right thing. Typical. 3 days later, they discharged her with painkillers and warnings to take it easy. Her boss at the laundromat had already called. Her position was no longer available. 23 years old, beaten half to death, jobless, and her rent was due in a week. Mara laughed bitterly as she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her studio apartment, each step an agony. This was what heroism got you in Noctare, nothing but pain and uncertainty. She'd just finished cleaning her wounds, the bathroom mirror reflecting a face she barely recognized with its bruises and stitches, when someone knocked on her door. 3 sharp raps, precise and commanding. Mara froze, her heart suddenly racing. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an immaculate black suit, his face partially shadowed by the hallway's broken lighting. Every instinct screamed danger. She should pretend she wasn't home, should call the police, should do anything except open that door. But something, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, Maybe the same reckless courage that had driven her into that alley made her turn the deadbolt and pull the door open. The man in the hallway was tall and imposing, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, cold and assessing, and when he looked at her, Mara felt like he could see straight through to her soul. He wore power like a second skin, and she knew who he was before he spoke. "You saved my daughter." Lucien Vale's voice was deep and controlled, each word measured and precise. He didn't ask. He stated it as fact. The hallway seemed to grow colder around him, shadows gathering at the edges of her vision. There was something about him that wasn't quite human, something predatory and ancient that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Mara swallowed hard, acutely aware of her threadbare clothes and the cramped apartment behind her. Yes. Is she okay?" The Dark Prince has arrived. What will he offer Mara? And what does it mean when the most dangerous man in Noctare looks at you like you matter? Don't forget to subscribe and like. Chapter 3 will reveal everything. Lucien Vale's gaze moved past her, taking in the studio apartment. A single room with a hot plate, a mattress on the floor, clothes hanging from a tension rod between walls. The paint was peeling, water damage staining the ceiling in brown clouds, and the window looked out onto an air shaft that never saw sunlight. It was the home of someone who survived rather than lived, and something flickered in his expression. Not pity, something darker and more complex. "She's recovering," he said finally, returning his attention to Mara. "Physically, at least. The psychological trauma." He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "That will take longer." "I'm sorry," Mara whispered. "I'm sorry that happened to her." "You're apologizing?" The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're the only reason she's alive, Miss Thorne. My men found the alley. They saw the blood, yours and others. They found the pipe you used." He studied her battered face with those storm-gray eyes. 6 armed men, and you fought them all to save a child you didn't know. Why? The question hung between them, heavy with genuine curiosity. Mara shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Because it was wrong. Because nobody else was going to help her. Because... She trailed off, struggling to articulate something she barely understood herself. "Because I've spent my whole life watching people look away. I couldn't be one of them. Not when it mattered." Lucien was silent for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his features. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a thick manila envelope, setting it carefully on the small table by her door. "This is for you. Compensation for your medical bills, lost wages, and..." He hesitated, and for just a second, the mask of cold control slipped. "For giving me back my daughter." Mara looked at the envelope. It was obviously full of cash, probably more money than she'd seen in her entire life. Her rent, her debts, maybe even enough to get out of Noctare entirely. Start over somewhere clean and safe. But as she stared at it, something in her chest tightened. "I didn't do it for money," she said quietly. "I didn't do it for any kind of reward. I'm aware." His voice carried a note of something like surprise. "Everyone wants something, Miss Thorne. Everyone has a price. In my experience, heroism is just another transaction. People save others because they expect gratitude, recognition, a reward." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "But you refused the reward the police offered. You didn't sell your story to the newspapers. You didn't even try to contact me for compensation. You just did it, and then went back to your life." "What else was I supposed to do?" Mara asked, genuinely confused. "She needed help. I helped her. That's all." Lucien stepped closer, and Mara caught a scent like rain and smoke, something wild and dangerous. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost vulnerable. "Then you're the first person in years who's looked at me like a man, not a monster." The words struck her like a physical blow. Because despite everything, despite his reputation, despite the fear his name inspired, despite the shadows that seemed to cling to him, she realized she wasn't afraid. She should be. Any sane person would be. But all she saw was a father who'd nearly lost his child, a man who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, someone who'd learned to be a monster because the world demanded it. "I don't think you're a monster," Mara said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I think you're a father who loves his daughter. And I think Noctare makes monsters out of everyone who survives it." Something cracked in Lucian's carefully maintained facade. Pain, maybe. Or recognition, or something deeper she couldn't name. He looked away, toward the grimy window, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. "My daughter keeps asking about you. She wants to thank you properly." He pulled out a business card, setting it beside the envelope. "Come to the Valamont building tomorrow at noon, please." The last word, please, sounded like it cost him something to say, like a man unused to asking rather than commanding, unused to being vulnerable with anyone. Mara picked up the card, feeling the expensive cardstock between her fingers. Valamont Industries, with an address in the city's financial district, the gleaming towers where people like her never went. "I'll come," she said, "but I'm not taking the money." "We'll discuss that tomorrow." Lucien moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold, looking back at her with those storm-colored eyes. "Miss Thorne, the Crimson Fangs will come for you. They don't forgive, and they don't forget. You've made yourself a target." Fear flickered through her, but Mara lifted her chin. "I know. It was worth it." For the first time, Lucien Vale smiled. A real smile, small and sad and somehow beautiful on that harsh face. "Yes," he said quietly. "It was." Then he was gone, disappearing down the stairwell like smoke, leaving Mara alone with an envelope full of money she wouldn't take, and a business card that felt like a doorway to another world. She stood in her doorway for a long time after he left, touching the stitches on her forehead and thinking about the way he'd looked at her. Not with the cold calculation she'd expected, but with something almost like wonder. Like she'd done something he'd forgotten was possible. Like she'd reminded him of what it meant to be human. Outside her window, Noctare's neon signs buzzed and flickered against the dark, the city continuing its endless cycle of desperation and survival. But something had shifted. In helping one lost girl, Mara had drawn the attention of the Dark Prince himself, and whether that was a blessing or a curse, only time would tell. The sky over Noctareth looked like a healing bruise when Mara left the crumbling building she called home. Lucian's card burned in her palm. 3 times she thought about turning back. 3 times she stared at the dark stairwell she knew so well. But every broken step, every moldy wall reminded her why she'd said yes. The Valamont building rose above the financial district, like a cathedral of black glass. Stone gargoyles perched at each corner, and far above, the distant silhouette of Castle Valamont cut the cloudy sky like a broken crown. Inside, the lobby belonged to another world. Dark marble veined with silver. Towering columns carved with scenes of ancient battles, and robed sorcerers raising hands toward a bleeding moon. Chandeliers dripped crystal from a vaulted ceiling, painted with constellations that glowed with their own light. Mara wanted to hide her bandaged hands in her pockets. "Can I help you?" The receptionist measured her with a quick glance. Bruises, second-hand clothes, tired eyes. "I have an appointment with Lucien Vale." Mara placed the card on the counter. The woman's expression changed instantly. "Of course, Miss Thorne. He's expecting you." A security guard in a dark suit escorted her to the private elevators. As she passed through the metal frame, Mara saw discrete symbols etched into the steel, thin lines that shimmered as if breathing. A chill ran through her that wasn't just cold. On the top floor, the corridor was lined with dark wood and framed portraits. Storm-gray eyes repeated painting after painting, in faces from different centuries, men and women with the same mark in their gaze, power and exhaustion. The double doors stood half open. "Come in," his voice said before she could knock. The office was vast, with an entire wall of glass showing Noctare below, a smear of trembling lights amid shadows. On the shelves, ancient books shared space with blades in display cases and stones carved with faded runes. Lucian stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. In the gray daylight, he seemed less legend and more man, yet still dangerous. "You came," he said. "You invited me," she replied, trying to sound less impressed than she was. His eyes traveled over the cuts and bruises still marking her face. "The doctors said you insisted on being discharged too early." "My rent doesn't wait," she shrugged. "Or it didn't. Now I don't even have a job." He sat in a low leather chair and gestured to the other. "That's what I want to discuss. Employment, and the fact that you're in danger. Because of the Crimson Fangs." "Yes." He didn't sugarcoat it. "Cale Rowan doesn't accept humiliation. You made him lose the greatest leverage he ever had against me. If you stay where you are, walking the same streets, they will find you." "So this is protection in exchange for what exactly?" Lucian studied her for a long moment. "In exchange for you accepting to be part of my world, not as a soldier, not as a puppet, as someone I need close to my daughter." Mara blinked. "To Isabella?" "She asks about you every day," he said, and for an instant the Dark Prince vanished, leaving only a father. "But it's not just that. I own the Valamont Foundation. Shelters, food distribution, legal aid. I want you there, on the front lines. Isabella also works in that sector. She needs to see the city through your eyes, and you. Understand the underside of the tower." "I don't know anything about office work," she murmured. "I have no degree. I don't know how to work fancy spreadsheets." "You know how to recognize fear, pride, lies, and desperation when you look at someone," Lucian replied. "In the places I operate, that's worth more than a degree." He slid a folder across the table. Contract, badge, a salary that seemed like fiction, insurance, housing in a protected Valamont building. "If I say no?" "I'll still try to protect you," he said honestly, "but my influence diminishes with every block you descend. And the Fangs don't respect boundaries." Mara looked out the window. Down there, some laundromat could be hers. Some alley could be the last one she'd ever cross alive. She remembered the knife, the boots kicking her ribs, Isabella running. "If I accept, does that mean what happened in the alley was a debt between us?" she asked. "Because I don't want to live owing favors." Lucian tilted his head. "You saved the life of the most important person to me. It's not a debt. It's a fact that can't be repaid. What I'm offering now is a new agreement. Work for protection. Purpose for risk." The words echoed in her. Purpose. Risk. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll take the job, but not the money from that night." "I already had the envelope destroyed," he replied, and this time there was a trace of a real smile. "So we're even." He stood. "There's someone who wants to speak with you." In the adjacent sitting room, smaller and cozier, a small figure sat in an armchair, nervously swinging her feet. When Mara entered, the blue eyes widened. "I knew you'd come," Isabella said, jumping up. "I told Papa. Nobody with an iron heart abandons someone after saving them." Mara felt something tighten in her chest. "Your father's been telling too many stories about me." "Not even half," Isabella smiled shyly. Can I hug you?" Mara hesitated for a second, thinking about the bruises. Then she opened her arms. The girl wrapped her in a careful, trembling embrace. In that instant, between the glass tower above and the stone city below, Mara was certain. Any path away from here would also take her away from this. And that she didn't want. If you're enjoying this new phase of Mara in the Dark Prince's Tower, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps bring more Noctare stories. Ready to see what happens when she starts working alongside Isabella and Helena? Let's go to Chapter 5. The 12th floor of the Valemont building didn't resemble the rest of the tower. Instead of marble and gold, the Valemont Foundation had walls with murals painted by artists from the lower city, maps with colored pins marking shelters, soup kitchens, clinics, stacks of boxes, the smell of strong coffee, voices talking all at once. "Welcome to organized chaos," said Helena Drouaine, handing Mara a badge with the Valemont symbol in discreet silver. "Don't worry. Nobody here really knows what they're doing. The difference is we don't admit it." Helena was everything at once. Elegant and exhausted, ironic and protective. Sharp eyes, dark hair pulled back carelessly. Unlike many there, she didn't bother hiding her weariness. "The North Shore District lost their donation warehouse in an accidental fire," she explained, walking quickly down the corridor. "Cale pretends he knows nothing, the council pretends not to see, and we pretend we can cover all the gaps." "What exactly will I be working on?" Mara asked. "Isabella," Helena replied, "and everything connected to her. This sector handles youth programs in the lower city. Reading clubs, quick courses, shelters for teenagers fleeing homes or gangs. The idea is simple. If young people have another loyalty besides fear, Kael loses soldiers." "Another kind of war," Mara murmured. "All of them are," Helena responded. Isabella poked her head out of a room, her face lighting up when she saw Mara. "You really came." "Yes, Tower Princess." Mara smiled. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" "They already are." Isabella held up her fingers stained with marker ink. "We're putting together school supply kits for the kids in the dock district. Come on." For a few hours, everything seemed simple. Isabella drew small symbols on the backpacks, stars, moons, tiny castles. Mara helped organize, took notes, listened to the team's stories, who needed medicine, who was missing, which gang had switched territories. "Do you know this last name?" Helena asked, pointing to a file with a 15-year-old boy. Mara knew it. "His mother washed clothes during my old shift. The father drinks what little comes in. The boy kept saying he was going to make a name with the fangs." "Then let's give him another place to put that name," Helena said. "You talk to him when he comes to pick up his backpack." "Why me?" "Because he knows your face, not mine. And because you already said no to the most dangerous gang in the region. I know you're capable of showing another path." As the day passed, the Foundation people began looking at Mara differently. Not as the girl the boss protects, but as someone who knew how to explain to a nervous mother why it was worth trusting the shelter, or to a stubborn old woman that accepting a blanket wasn't charity, it was a right. When the sun began to hide, the light in Noctare changed color, pulling the world into a bluish twilight. Outside, fog rose from the river. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Helena lifted her head immediately, like an animal scenting danger. "That's not a power issue," she murmured. "It's someone knocking on the wrong door." "Who?" Mara asked, but already suspected. The answer came through the window. On the other side of the glass, in the street, the fog grew denser, forming a circle. From within, it emerged a tall man, dark red coat to his feet, hair almost white. No visible weapon, but the way those nearby retreated said everything. Cale Rowan lifted his gaze to the 12th floor and smiled. "Lock the doors," Helena ordered. "Now. Issa, to the security room." "No." Isabella grabbed Mara's sleeve. "He came for her. I know that kind of look. That's exactly why you're leaving, Helena countered. Mara, take her. The lights went out completely. For a second, everything was darkness and held breaths. Then a pale glow began leaking through the door cracks, as if someone had lit a moon on the other side. This wasn't the kind of light that brings comfort. Shadebinder, Helena murmured. Someone on the council lent Cale a new toy. The word meant nothing to Mara, but the cold that filled the corridor did. It was a cold of memories, night, hunger, abandonment. Helena pushed Isabella toward the end of the corridor. Inner room, now. I'll stay with her, Mara said. If he came for me, she's in the line of fire if I leave. You're both going to the inner room, Helena decided. I'll seal the protections. Go. The room looked like a supply closet, but the walls hid reinforced metal and almost invisible runes. Helena locked it from outside, and for a moment, the silence seemed solid. Then something dragged itself through the crack under the door. It looked like liquid shadow, climbing the wall against gravity, forming a humanoid shape. Eyes like embers opened in the stain. Isabella cowered behind Mara. The voice came from inside their heads, not through their ears. Look at that. The little savior. The weight on Mara's chest almost brought her to her knees. Memories came in waves. Mother leaving with a small suitcase, the first late rent payment, the boss saying, "Nobody will miss you if I fire you." Each scene, distorted, amplified, thrown at her as proof she was worth nothing. "Don't listen," Isabella whispered, clutching the hem of Mara's shirt. "It lies." "No lies," the whisper continued. "Everyone will use you. The Dark Prince, his daughter, this city. Come with me. Let go." The fear was real, but it was also familiar. Mara had always carried it, just not with this voice. And where fear was strongest, something else insisted on staying. The memory of shouting, "Run!" to a girl she didn't even know. The feeling of looking at Lucienne and saying, "I don't want your money." The way Isabella had hugged her. "You don't know anything about me," Mara said, her voice trembling but firm. "You're just using the garbage in my head. But that garbage is mine. It's not your weapon." The shadow wavered. The ember eyes narrowed. "Interesting," it murmured. Iron. In the wrong place. A red thread, like sewing line, appeared connecting the shadow to a point beyond the wall. Mara didn't know how she knew, but she did. It pointed to Cale. And farther, to something older and colder watching from above, the council. "Don't touch it." Isabella pulled her arm. "Please, Mara." But what made Mara raise her hand wasn't curiosity. It was rage. At being hunted, measured, used. At seeing a 12-year-old girl learn so early what it meant to be a target. She grabbed the thread. Not with her fingers. With something deeper. A place inside her that seemed to have always been heavy and silent. Made of imaginary iron. The shock came from both sides. She felt Cale's astonishment at the other end of the line. A kind of, this wasn't supposed to happen. And even farther, a collective gaze turning in her direction, as if old statues had suddenly opened their eyes. Mara pulled. The thread snapped. The shadow released a silent scream, writhing, losing form. Within seconds it became thin smoke and dissolved into the air. The pale light vanished. The building seemed to breathe again. Isabella trembled, but not from cold. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew your heart was different." Mara slid down the wall until she sat on the floor. She felt nauseous, sweating, her chest burning. But the fear wasn't the same anymore. The door exploded inward seconds later. Lucian entered first, eyes too dark, storm glow in them. Behind him, guards, some with strangely silver reflections in their eyes. "Mara," he called, voice too deep. Are you... He stopped, seeing the dark trail on the wall, already fading, and Helena's eyes, coming right behind, wide with something Mara hadn't seen in that woman before. Genuine surprise. The shade's gone, Helena said. No trace, no return. That doesn't happen. Lucien knelt before Mara. His hands were steady when they held hers. What did you do? He asked quietly. I just got tired of being afraid, Mara murmured. And I cut the thread. The word thread seemed to weigh in the air. Helena let out a short sigh. Guess who's going to want to talk about this, she said. The council. Isabella squeezed Mara's hand tighter. They won't take her, will they? Lucien looked at his daughter, then at Mara. And for the first time, in the Dark Prince's expression, there was something she recognized without needing any magic. He was afraid too. If this confrontation with the Shade and the Crimson Fang leader has kept you here, subscribe and leave a like. It shows you want to see more of this silent war in Noctare. Only Chapter 6 left, where the council enters the game and Mara must choose her own fate. Ready? The news spread quickly, even though nobody said it aloud. A shade had been broken, and not by Lucien, nor by the council's mages, by a girl with no ancient surname, no training, no place in Noctareth's hierarchy. That same night, a white-eyed raven landed on the tower's high balcony. The message was brief. The variable shall be presented. The council requires clarification. Variable, Helena repeated, pacing back and forth in the Foundation's private office. They didn't even bother using your name. It's almost a compliment. It's a threat, Lucien countered. When the council doesn't understand something, it tries to fit it in a box. If it doesn't fit, they break it. Mara sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed, still pale but standing. They sent the Shade to break me first, didn't they? Kyle sent it, Helena corrected. But he wouldn't have access to a shade binder without someone on the council opening some ancient basement door. Now they know you cut their cord. I bet they're rewriting 6 prophecies in a hurry. Prophecies? Mara raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Don't let the expensive suit fool you, Helena said. Half of Noctareth's politics is still decided by texts nobody understands properly and mirrors full of smoke. And you just appeared in one of those reflections. Isabella was devastatingly serious, sitting beside Mara. Since the incident, she didn't want to be far from her, not even a few feet. If they want answers, Mara said, what does that mean for me? That I'll be interrogated, tested, and catalogued, Helena added bitterly. They love catalogs. Who has power, who doesn't, who's useful, who's a threat. Lucien was silent, looking out the window toward where Castle Valamont rose in the distance, stuck in the rock like a thorn. That's where the council met, not in public rooms but in chambers nobody saw, full of tapestries too old and decisions that fell on the city like ice. You're not going to them, he said finally. If they want to talk to you, let them come down. Helena whistled low. That's going to cause a fight. It already has, he replied. Kale attacked my building, my employees, my daughter, and failed because someone they would despise on any other day decided not to yield. His storm-gray eyes returned to Mara. There was pride there, and a concern he didn't try to hide. That's why you'll have a choice, Lucien continued. For the first time, perhaps. A real choice. Mara met his gaze. You think they'll just let me walk away if I choose to? If I move enough of my pieces, yes, he replied. I can get you out of Noctare. Houses in other cities, new identities, discreet protection. You'd start from scratch, far from Kale, far from the council, far from me, too. The idea was tempting in a simple way. Silence, anonymity, A life where the biggest problem was paying bills, not cutting shadow threads cast by ancient mages. Or, Helena completed, you stay. Learn what this thing inside you is. Learn to use it instead of being used. And officially become a thorn in the side of people who don't like being contradicted. If you stay, you'll be a piece in a much larger game, Lucian said, not sugarcoating it. Cale will try to break you again. The council will try to mold or destroy you, and my name will be both shield and target around you. Isabella held Mara's hand too tightly for such small fingers. If you go, I'll understand, she said with difficulty. But I don't want to understand. Isa, Mara murmured. You were the first person who looked at my father and didn't just see the monster everyone sees, Isabella insisted. And you were the first who looked at me and didn't just see the Dark Prince's daughter. I don't want to be the only one in my house with a different heart. Damn word, house, family. Mara thought about the damp stairs of the old building, the laundromat boss yelling, the way the police looked at her after the alley, with respect for one day, forgotten the next. She thought about Isabella's hug, Helena's sincere question. Do you know this last name? As if a former laundress's opinion mattered in decisions. She also thought about the shade and the red thread. I don't know what I am, she admitted. I don't know if this thing in me is magic, madness, or just stubbornness. But I know one thing. I'm tired of being just scenery, of watching people decide who lives and who dies while I hide my head. She took a deep breath. If I leave, someone will take my place as a target. Some other random girl will be in an alley someday, and maybe nobody will pass by. Nobody will pick up the old pipe on the ground. Lucian watched her in silence. Helena, too. Even some of the nearby guards seemed to hold their breath. So I'm staying, Mara said. But I'm staying my way. Not as the council's weapon. Not as your trophy, Lucian. I'm staying as... She searched for the right word. As someone who knows what it's like to be afraid, and who decided not to let anyone else decide for her what that fear means. A strange silence settled, full, heavy, but not oppressive, like the moment before a good storm. Lucian inclined his head. It wasn't the gesture of a gang boss. It wasn't just the Dark Prince. It was almost an oath. Then, Mara Thorne, he said, with the formality of old names. Before the shadows of Noctare and under the gaze of Castle Valamont, I recognize you as an ally of House Valamont. As long as I draw breath, no one will take you by force. Not the council, not Cale, not anyone. Helena rolled her eyes, but there was a small smile there. Great. Now, besides being a target, you're meeting minutes material. Isabella, however, hugged Mara again, tighter. If they come for you, the girl whispered, they'll have to go through me too. I hope they're smart enough not to try, Mara replied. Outside, the city remained the same. Wet cobblestone streets, failing lights, tired voices. The council, high in the castle, probably discussed in low voices, measuring words, remembering old prophecies about iron hearts and broken bonds. Kyle Rowan, in some warehouse by the river's edge, probably sharpened new plans. At the edge of the forest of shadows, the ancient trees seemed to lean a little more toward the city, as if an invisible wind had shifted. Nothing, at first glance, had transformed. But in a glass tower, a girl who'd spent her life removing stains from clothes was learning to deal with older, deeper stains in Noctareth's soul. And for the first time, the monsters who ruled the night knew there was someone who could, with one pull, break the threads they believed they controlled alone. The end. If you enjoyed Mara's journey, from anonymous laundry girl to ally of House Valamont, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment which country you're watching from. That way, I know where these Noctareth shadows are reaching and can create more stories in this universe for you.